Just getting Facebook all ready to go. Sorry about that, everybody. My computer froze, but I'm back. Thank you for your patience. We're going to go ahead and get started. I believe the issue is with Facebook. So I'm going to ask if, I'm going to make Delia our co-host and ask if they could, or wait, no, actually, I'll just leave it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. It looks like it's working. Welcome to our second of 3 in a series of our Youth Dialogue Face-to-Face. Our hope with this event is to further interfaith understanding out in the public sphere, out in the community during the pandemic, so that's or Zoom space right now. This winter mini-series is featuring youth voices with the hope that we can uplift young local leaders who will share their interfaith perspectives in ways that might transform the world around us. So over the next 45 minutes, you're going to hear from 2 such leaders I'll introduce to you all in a moment. And they're going to be speaking about the ways that they find their faith identity has informed their understanding of their art practice. I also wanted to extend a note of gratitude to our social work intern, Delia, for helping to organize this series. So welcome to Husnaa and Laila. I'll introduce both of our speakers. Husnaa Haajarah Hashim is a poet, interdisciplinary artist, student herbalist, and undergraduate at the University of Pennsylvania. She is the author of the chapbook Honey Sequence and that was published during her tenure as the Youth Poet Laureate of Philadelphia in 2017 to 2018. Laila Islam is a student at Moore College of Art and Design, majoring in Curatorial Studies. They are the founder and co-curator of the youth-based visual arts collective, The Future Is Us. Islam is also a Mellon Undergraduate Curatorial Fellow at the University of Art, Philadelphia Museum of Art, excuse me. So the way this is gonna go is I'm gonna pose a few questions to Laila and Husnaa. They'll have a bit of a dialogue around the themes I'm asking them about, and then towards the end of our time together, we'll have time for a Q&A. So Laila and Husnaa, my first question for you both is, has your religious or spiritual identity how has it interacted with your art craft? And how has that developed for you over time? And whoever would like to go first is welcome to.
I can start.
Thanks.
I think with my curatorial experience, specifically with the collective and the community work that I do with that collective, one of the things my parents always taught me, and I guess this is like something that they emphasize in Islam as well, is doing things with intention and making sure that you are aware of your intentions when you're doing things. So I guess for me, for every project, and even with the start of my collective, I always made it so that I was really conscious of like what I was doing my work for, who I'm doing it for, and how it serves people and how it serves myself. I think Over time too, I guess I would say like I've been more aware of that as my like projects and my craft has like developed. Um, but yeah, I would say that.
I'll share in a little bit of a different way. I think for me, it's been more content related. So the primary medium that I was working in throughout high school was poetry, and a little bit of slam as well. And so oftentimes I felt the need or the desire to assert my identity or kind of like a holistic representation of myself through my work. So oftentimes that would show up as including Quranic verses or ayats in poems that I was writing, or kind of trying to like not translate certain words if they were in Arabic or in Farsi, and allowing for that little slight bit of discomfort from the recipient or the audience member or the listener. Um, and over time, I feel more of a, I guess, like a reclamation. So that isn't as important to me to be super ultra specific in those representations, because I know that I ultimately am whole regardless. But I think that's kind of been the primary engagement. And a little bit of tokenization with that, especially with the first piece, but definitely the assertion, I think, was authentic.
Thank you both for starting us off on those thoughtful reflections. Thinking about where you are in your life as young adults, you're both undergraduates in a university setting, and thinking about what your art and your craft has looked like, your identity, ruminating all over those things. What has your experience been in reclaiming your identity independent from your family, your school, your religious community spaces of your younger youth? What has that looked like or felt like? Laila, would you mind going again if you're ready?
Um, yeah, I would. I guess also to jump off of what Husna was saying earlier with the tokenism aspect. I feel like could you actually repeat the question really quickly? I just want to make sure that I'm answering it. Like,
Sure. I asked a long-winded question. Um, so we're thinking about both of you as young adults in a university setting, and I'm wondering what has been your experience in reclaiming your identity as an artist, as a young person, independent from your family, maybe high school, or your religious community spaces from when you were younger.
okay. Thank you. I definitely feel like from my experience, coming into a predominantly white institution from a high school that was like predominantly black and predominantly Muslim, there was like for me uh, this difference in essentially this experience where I had to really cultivate my own personal relationship with religion. Um, that wasn't really influenced by anyone else because I didn't necessarily have a community. Um, and I also feel like Husna was saying with the tokenism aspect, like with that too, um, it kind of felt like the only opportunities or opportunities that I had to really vocalize my relationship with my religion was through this like aspects of like advertisement for the school and things like that. So I think for me in general, stepping away from those like types of quote unquote opportunities was the thing that I had to like I guess like be aware of and like practice, and also just in general I would say the reclaiming aspect definitely for me was like you know just straight up figuring out for me like what it is that I genuinely what aspects of Islam do I genuinely love and things like that. What does it do for me and not necessarily what does it do for my community, because I think it was this level of like independence that I had to like, I guess, come to face with. If that makes sense. But
Along the line of tokenism or tokenization, I think for me, learning that I can actually say no and that my no can have a lot of integrity behind it. And so the faith community that I guess I was born into had a lot to say over the summer, and a lot of engagement or programming that I was invited to participate in. And so having a lot of integrity in my no, like the timing isn't right, or I don't know how much I really resonate with y'all, or how much I want to be representing y'all in that way, and how might that negatively be affecting myself. So a very pared, since coming to college, a very pared down understanding of my lineages, cultural, religious, racial, and all of that. And like Lila said, choosing what is resonant with me, what's important to me, and what am I going to carry into my life. And why am I Muslim? Why is that an identifier or word that's actually important to me beyond my grandparents choosing this for me, right? So I really like Muslims often translated as submission to the divine or to creator. But I really like the translation that's really embraced by Dr. Ann Holmes' writing, which is surrender. So there's this active choice in that, and the recognition of being lowercase human that I think is really important. And so if I can stay in that really baseline subtle part of like lowercase human, everything's bigger than me, I can do more work with building up who I am on my terms rather than what is imposed upon me.
I just wanted to say something to jump off of that too. Like, um, I also like, I guess, with the aspect of representation too. Like, I think there was this like subconscious, like, I guess, pressure in my head, and maybe even something that like my parents like emphasized to, was just essentially to like represent like, you know, my religion and other identities too, being or inserting myself in like new spaces or different platforms that like my parents or, you know, people before me didn't necessarily have access to. um and I think one of the things I've been like, I guess, learning and like reshaping is like what that representation looks like, and it, I guess, what, how genuine I want that representation to be, because I don't think necessarily uh it has to be, you know, a specific perspective or a perspective lens that like people might, I guess, project onto me and things like that. Not sure if that makes sense, but
That definitely makes sense. And I'm really appreciating how the two of you are building off of each other in this, and it feels like there's some similar themes in stepping into this space, and also sort of, Husnaa, I really appreciate your reclaiming of no and the integrity of no and what that looks like, especially as an adult. So yes, I'm really loving the way that you two are reflecting on this. And one of the other questions I've been holding as you and I were, the three of us were talking together before this event, is also thinking through, and you both touched on this a bit, but how has your faith or spiritual practices and identity helped or hindered this phase of personal change, which I think you both started to allude to a bit, but
Help or hindered what?
your experience as young artists in both an institution but also away from home, quote unquote.
I think the grounding basis, or like the starting point of knowing who I am has been really helpful. And it's the complicated, or I guess the hindering part of that is the reclamation like has to take place after the imposition. That might not make any sense, but I've seen a lot of my peers really suffer with not even necessarily values, but kind of just like navigating spaces socially and academically because they don't know who they are quite literally. And so I'm thankful that I've always known who I am and that my people, my ancestors are important to me and they're with me, and that I'm a lowercase human. So there's a divine source that's always with me as well. So that's the good part. I guess the negative part is that like there's a lot of work that has to be done, breaking free from like cultural and religious trauma that I think most people have. That's a side effect of being a young person raised in society and kind of coming into adulthood.
I 100% agree. And I also feel like, too, with the, again, the aspect of representation, like, I feel like knowing who I am and knowing where I come from allows me to not tolerate, foolery, basically. Uh, and I will also say, too, I guess when it comes to blockages or things, I kind of want to put blame or like my grievances on like my relationship with like the institutions that I had to uh interact with, because I feel like if anything it was always an instance where I was trying to either deeper investigate my relationship with religion and intersect that into my work, or even just practice Islam. And it was hard, like not having a space to pray and like a communal space and things like that, or not having allotted times for prayer during class and stuff like that. So I feel like small stuff like that is really what, if anything, has been a hardship. Not necessarily my relationship with the religion, but more so my relationship with institutions and stuff.
Thank you, Laila. That's often something I think that gets highlighted in some of these conversations is how do we make space for people to reclaim that on their own, and sometimes it is things that are as simple as prayer space, time, respect for how people are going to observe and engage in their religious and spiritual identity. One thing that I've also been thinking about is, as you all have been talking about institutions, Laila, you really talked about this just a moment ago about the way that being in an institution of higher education as an artist has held both opportunities that you both have kind of said yes or no to, but it's also had restrictions. So what has that looked like for you? What are the restrictions and what are the opportunities that you've encountered as artists in these institutions, these educational institutions?
I would say, in all honesty, for me, like my experiences when it comes to, I guess, opportunities like regarding that is more so my experience being Black. If I'm being honest, and if anything, the institutions that I interact with, they haven't honestly really even been interested in like, supporting or advocating or promoting like, Islamic perspectives, uh, whether it be through programming or events. But I don't know. I would, hmm. Like, are you asking just like how has those experiences limited my relationship, or?
Just in your experience as an artist. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to do with just your religious identity either. It sounds like you're speaking to how that's intersected with your identity as a Black artist, particularly.
Yeah, I would definitely say from my experience, and I think too, coming into school, like I was eager in general, I think, to like, have support for the programmings that I do and the collective that I run and stuff like that. Just a way to like engage with my school and intersect that with the things that I do outside of school. Um, and it seems to me as if there was only interest when there was like realization that it was profitable. So I think that was like, I guess, a blockage. I'm not exactly sure if I'm answering the question right, but from my experience, that's usually how it goes, where, support or I guess advocacy or whatever you want to call it is only like present once people are like wind of how profitable it could be. But
I think in many ways I felt like stifled by school. My school's really white and pre-professional, and there are a lot of class disparities. So coming into it, I kind of knew that my art would not exactly struggle, but like wouldn't be given priority by the institution or really myself. And when I chose not to be an English major, I study Africana studies and creative writing and Farsi. And when I decided to do that, I think part of that was some of those, like teasing out those identity related questions in work. And so having academic container to do that in really like traditionally, I think is a better use of my time at Penn, as opposed to if I was at a different school, then maybe doing more artistic things would be more meaningful to me. So that's definitely been a loss for me because I don't have as much creative support as I would like, despite still studying poetry. But the Curator's House at Penn is like my primary hub. So I've felt a lot of support there, but again, it's very cyclical and feels tangential because there's race, race related issues, and so many things that are problems, regardless of where you find a home and like where institutions are able to be supportive. So no more institutions. No, I think we can have them in a productive way, but maybe not. So I'm still here, but my goal is really just to graduate, then to focus on creating community, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And you all are both existing as artistic people and artists in really different kinds of institutions. Laila, you're at an art school versus Husnaa, you're in a university whose focus is not necessarily the arts. And so it sounds like you both are holding these different experiences of how these institutions can support you, but also how they're limiting you. We're getting some great questions in the chat, but I have one more question for both of you that we thought about a bit beforehand. And something that I like to ask people is, what do you as young artists need from the Philadelphia community? What could we all be doing to make your experience of your craft better?
I would say 100%. Like there needs to be. I think in general in Philadelphia, there's like a lot of cool and interesting programming for high school age students that are like interested in the arts. But pretty much it seems like after you know teens turn 18, there's like no support. So I feel like there needs to be some type of like financial support and stimulation for young adults in general, whether it be to transition into college and to stay in college. Because I know so many high school students, specifically students that are like in the art field, particularly writers and things like that, that had to drop out because of financial issues. So like there's this like gap that people try to I guess break when, and I think it's also too again with that like tokenism thing, because the programming that I see in Philly, like a lot of times that are like high school only, it seems as if it's only like you know promoted or funded because it's very I guess, easily branded because it's youth. It seems as if like people don't specifically, Philly is primarily Black too. Like it seems like people only care about like Black kids and not like Black adults or Black, you know what I mean? Um, so I would say just give people money and give people, spaces for them to create after they turn 18.
Thanks,
I
Laila.
agree for certain with for sure about the funding, and if you're asking for someone to do anything for you, please pay them. I struggled so much in high school just with feeling disrespected, and I remember venting to someone and maybe my mom or something, and I said, like, if I was just offered a sandwich and 2 tokens, I would do the gig. Like, I would read my poems. It simply, but to not even be thought of as like, okay, what's your transportation? Is this after trans passes work? Like, do you have food? Like, what day of the week is it? Like, that little bit of consideration it goes so far, as well as speaking from or speaking to someone who may have some level of power in a religious or even an educational institution, valuing art just as anything else. So for example, if you curate awards for your religious institution for young people, is there an award related to like art? Are you considering writing as an art form, which it is? Like, are you having rigid lines between genre in a way that students feel like they can't submit their work? And also, are you compensating them some way as a reward? Are you giving them a trophy or a scholarship? Like, how are you actually deeply investing, again, rather than tokenizing or thinking, how can young people be of benefit to me? How can you use your resources to build them up and help them in whatever it is that you're so proud of them for?
Yeah, I would
Can
definitely
we
say like distributing resources in ways that are long lasting and not just for an event or just that are very temporal, like in general. Like there should be foundations laid through the resources that you had instead of just like, an award.
support young artists like they are quote unquote professional artists, because they are, is basically a lot of what I'm hearing. And there seems to be this gap between being under 18 and having support for the arts in sort of this marketable way because it's kids doing art. And then how do we move into a space where you all as students, but also as adults who are carving out your space as artists, garner that support and respect that you so greatly deserve in the crafts that you're both doing. We have a lot of questions in the chat. Some of them were directly messaged to me. Some of them are, I think, public to the rest of the call. I'm going to scroll through them a bit and try to uplift a few with the remaining time that we have. Let's see. Laila, we have a question directed at you. If you wanted to speak a little bit more about your collective and what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you for asking. My collective, The Future Is Us, we're like a youth based coalition of artists. We essentially started in 2017. We essentially just like host different pop up events, um, different curated, long-standing shows that last for about 2 to 4 weeks. We also do different like community initiatives. The scope really of like what we do changed drastically because of COVID, as you can imagine. So instead of the art shows that we have, where teens were able to just like come to our shows for free, perform if they wanted to, support their peers if they want to. We pretty much do that same thing, but on a virtual, on virtual platforms. We recently hosted Camp Future Digital Arts Festival, where we had like a series of artist talks, um, virtual art parties where we had DJ sets and things like that. So we're really just trying to emphasize creating like safe and inclusive and inviting spaces for each other, where the audience and the sellers or showcasers are the same age. But I can definitely like send some like our website and things to the chat. That would be helpful. Or more so, I'll just throw in our Instagram.
Yes. Drop those in the chat. We have a question. It's not, I think it's to both of you, so to whomever this speaks to, from Laura. If you imagine being yourself and being an artist without this presence of your spiritual beliefs and practices, what would be missing?
Husnaa, do you want to go first?
I was just thinking about the wording of the question. That's such a interesting question. I think it goes back to like when I was speaking about surrender earlier. So if I'm not in surrender to something, then how would my ego like not explode? I can't imagine like, yeah, I can't imagine not believing like on the most basic level in something outside of myself. And I think that is really foundational to my work. And I think the turn that it's taking and being more or like transdisciplinary, and its inability to be stuck in one small kind of place. So mimicking like some type of expansiveness or greatness, I don't think that would be as easy for me if I didn't have a spiritual grounding kind of like foundation.
Thanks, Husnaa.
Thank you for that, because I feel like that gave me some, I guess, insight on like for me too, my perspective or whatever. Because I would say I'm very similar in that like my process and like my motivation, my momentum is really driven in like my practice. Not necessarily my practice, but even just like my spiritual, relationship with not only the creator but the universe in general. Um, but I would say on a more, I guess, like physical level too. Like I think as a curator, my like relationship with community and my like, I guess, passion for serving the community, I guess, might be different, possibly, because I feel like my initial experiences with community was really first, uh, you know, it really first started with being at the masjid, uh, and having that relationship. So I don't know, that probably might be a little different. And even now, like inherently being in Philly, like you're going to come across and like work with a lot of Muslim people. But I feel like my collective and like who I work with for that has been very like Black Muslim heavy, which has been really cool. And just like, I don't know, not necessarily just cool in the sense that like, oh, we share like the same like identity and culture, but more so just cool in that like we have the opportunity to do programming and things like that that are really serving for us and really relevant to us. And that really accommodates us when, we don't really get the right to do, or not necessarily the right, but the access to do that in other spaces. So
Awesome. Thank you, Laila. Looking at a few of our other questions here. We have a multi-part question. I'm gonna pull out a piece of it because there's quite a lot here. But how has your religious influence in your art been received by an audience, if your art has that influence?
could you say the question again?
Yeah, maybe I'll read the full question. There's two parts. Are your religious beliefs reflected in the art that you produce? Why or why not? We sort of talked about that earlier this evening. And then if it is, how has that been received by the audience?
It really just depends on the audience and also like how old I am. So I think when I was younger, and predominantly Indo-Pak, Arab, Iranian spaces, I had specific slam training, like performance poetry training, and specific poems that I knew would be most impactful or almost get like a rise out of people's racist family, which ultimately was very like cathartic, but very re-traumatizing in a way that I think was super unhealthy for me, because those were spaces that caused me harm. And in those spaces, it was very well received, like, oh my God, we're racist, oh no. And like, that's nice, but there's really not much action behind that reception. Like, it's not my job to kind of make you realize that you need to be a better person. And then I had pieces that were more important to me to share with predominantly like Black Muslim audiences that were also received very well, but that was still along the lines of this almost like trauma porn. And I think that's perpetuated in slam. With slam could be a whole nother conversation, but like, it's just really toxic for young people to be performing and ultimately like commodified for nothing. like nothing. So yeah, I feel like slam is dying out a little bit as like an art form. So in those particular like religious racialized spaces, I would say like my work was always received well, but ultimately at my detriment. And I could speak more to that, but I think that's like a concise response.
Thanks, Husnaa.
For me, I would say that my work, because I'm a practicing artist as well as a curator, I would say that like not my work personally isn't like, I don't really usually reflect my religious beliefs in my work, just because being a visual artist, it's kind of like sometimes uh I guess controversial. I guess I could say like some for when it comes to like imagery, especially imagery of people in Islam. So I try to like not do that.
I think you highlighted a good point in terms of religious literacy for people who aren't Muslim, that they might not be aware of like, why is maybe this imagery missing? It's because there is some controversy or different viewpoints around how that can be portrayed. So I appreciate you lifting that up, Laila. We have just a few more minutes, so I don't know if anyone else wants to submit a really burning question or they're holding anything else about what they've heard. So I'll give everyone just a moment. And as we're waiting for any final burning questions, Husnaa, if you want to also leave anything in the chat related to your work for people to check out, you're more than welcome to. Both of you are Googleable too. That's a weird adjective. But I wanted to thank everyone for joining tonight, since it doesn't seem to be any more burning questions. This event is being made available for free to our wider community. So if you feel so moved to donate to Interfaith Philadelphia, we'd be very grateful for that. I will say that our two artists are being paid for their time. Somebody asked about that as well. And we talked a little bit about that. So just naming that. So your support is greatly appreciated. And finally, we have a couple extra events coming up. There's a third event in this Dialogue Face-to-Face series focused on youth voices, as well as some upcoming trainings and events with Interfaith Philadelphia. So those will be dropped in the chat as well. And yes, thank you all for being here. Thank you both to Laila and Husnaa for your authentic sharing, your thoughtfulness, your openness to being present with us. We really appreciate both of you. And I hope 2021 provides some space for you all to have creative endeavors in community in person in some way. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.